everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Anna. I am a therapist, I'm a yoga teacher and so many other things. A singer as well. Basically, I've been very curious throughout my life and that's the way I love to live my life basically. So I am always on the lookout what's the next thing I'm gonna be studying. I wanted to talk about the inner critic or the inner shadow, but I don't want to kind of name it a shadow, because a shadow can be a positive part of us. Like the shadow is not only the bad part of us that we're trying to hide, but can also be a good part of us. But more about that on some other episode. Today we're going to talk about the inner critic and how to deal with it in a matter of personal empowerment. I am preparing a course. I already have everything written down, so I'm starting to record the videos as I can, but it's going to be about the personal power. So one of the things that truly really prevent us from achieving the personal power is the inner critic. And there's so many misunderstandings about the inner critic out there, and so many false advices. So I wanted to kind of chop it into pieces so we can digest it better. So basically, inner critic is the inner voice that criticizes us. And a lot of therapists kind of try to work on the inner critic in a manner where they're saying ignore it, or try with the positive affirmations or things like that. And that in a short term may work, but next time something happens that will trigger, and I'm going to talk about this later on in the video, that's going to trigger the inner critic, it comes back stronger. So in order to really understand what the inner critic is, we have to talk about when the inner critic was born. Now, the inner critic, his purpose is, you're going to be shocked now, is to keep you safe. So with all the experiences you had in your life, for example, you were bullied because of the way you look, the inner critic is going to stop you from looking a certain way in order to spare you from embarrassment. And like, inner critic can make zero sense in this regard, but if you really dig deep, if you really go down into the bottom, in the pit of traumas, you will find out why this inner critic exists. I'm going to give you a personal example. So I was really bullied by my family when I was a kid in regards to earning money and empowerment. When I was around 7 years old, my drunk father asked me, how much did you earn in your life so far? And I took it personally. Like, I am that kind of a person that when you say something to me, I really take it personally, and I questioned myself that night, how much did I earn in my life? And I realized that I didn't earn anything, and I kind of labeled myself as a person that is really bad with earning money. A 6 or 7, somewhere, I'm not sure if I was 6 or 7, but let's say 7-year-old, convincing herself that she's bad at earning money. So throughout my life, there was this shadow here that was constantly trying to keep me away from earning money because I was bad at it, right? And this inner critic kind of saved me from disappointment of even trying to do it. So I would kind of find ways to mess up my own success and achievements in order for this crazy critic in my head that was born when I was 7 years old, so it doesn't really have the sense. He was trying to keep me safe from realizing that I am really bad at earning money. So obviously this doesn't make sense. And if you try to kind of like say to that part of yourself, like, go away, I'm not listening to you, it's going to follow you and it's going to become even louder. So what do we do with the inner critic? In order to really deal and cope with the inner critic, we need to start listening to it. And let me elaborate on that. You're like, when my inner critic says, oh, don't do that, it's better if you just don't do it. It's not I'm gonna listen to the critic and say, okay, I'm not gonna do it. No, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna listen to the critic and I'm gonna say, okay, I hear you. I know you are very frightened now that if we take on this project or if we take on this job that we will not be successful and we will not be recognized, we're not going to be good enough, we're not going to be able to earn money through it, but we really need to try. And I can hear you that you're upset, and it's basically like talking to a child, but I really want to do this. So, you know, like in a way I'm saying to my inner critic, I acknowledge you, I know that you exist, but I'm gonna do things my way, even though I'm aware that we, not only you, we are afraid of embarrassment, of not being successful, of disappointment, and that is okay. So you see, the inner critic is not a bad boy or a bad girl. Sometimes it's there to also tell us that something is not going right. So in order to really kind of have a full life, we have to acknowledge all our parts. So the inner critic, the inner shadow, is also part of me. It was born due to the environment telling me that I shouldn't look, behave, or do stuff in a certain way, and then that part was born to protect me from experiencing that disappointment again. You know, when you're a child and you kind of try to grab something and you get like, no. You're like, the inner critic is gonna say like, oh shit, like we really need to be careful not to touch that thing again. And with the part of the brain that's responsible for that, it's a part of the brain that has been developing in the first 3 years. It reacts to similar things. So the inner critic is sometimes going to be triggered by something totally irrelevant to the situation that's happening. But it's the primal part of the brain where it's going to just trigger the response of like, oh, we had this happening before and it was dangerous. Now this can be ridiculous. You may be relaxing in your bed and the primal part of the brain is triggered because maybe earlier in your life you were called lazy if you were resting too much. So you're gonna be having the inner critic coming in and it's like, you lazy person, get off the sofa, you need to be productive. And basically when that happens, you can just turn around and face your inner critic and say, I can hear you, but I'm really tired at the moment, so, you know, like I'm gonna take 15 minutes and then we can work again. Dealing with inner critic has been very challenging for me because my inner critic is so loud. He is sometimes, I even call it a he, interesting. So imagine like the connection. So it definitely is born through my relationship with my father because he was really tough on himself and then he was really tough on the kids. The fact that he was drinking a lot when I was a child also didn't help, but basically my inner critic sometimes doesn't make sense at all, and he's triggered by mostly good things as well. He thrives in bad situations. He's the king there because he's kind of used to them. So also the inner critic is gonna often show up when things that never happened before start happening, because he's going to be, again, really worried for you. This is the part of the brain, we can call it an ego as well, that loves the things that are known rather than things that are unknown. So the inner critic is going to vouch mostly for the things that are similar to the things that happened to you before. If something happens that never happened to you before, the inner critic will be like freaking out. Because he's like, this is dangerous, like what's gonna happen, like this is unknown territory, how are we gonna solve this? So, you're gonna have to pretty much learn how to live with the inner critic because he's not going away. sometimes the inner critic is going to do you good. Sometimes I had situations where my inner critic actually pulled me out of depression because he was a bit tough on me. So in certain situations, like, he didn't allow me to sink too deep, because he would be like, okay, like, you're lying in your bed for 3 days, this is not acceptable, you're gonna have to get out. And that moment when I actually got out and took a walk, or, you know, did something, I felt better. So inner critic has the best intentions. It's like one of those parents from, like, I don't know, 60s or 50s, where they have like the best intentions but they do the most stupid things to their children. So inner critic is something like that. We can talk also about how the inner critic criticizes our looks. And look, this is the shadow part of us, where we want to be loved, but we're afraid that with the physical look that we have, we're not going to get that love, because when we were kids, we had to explain it to ourselves why we weren't loved. So a child will just look for silly reasons. And, you know, if we went through the primary school or something and the kids bullied us, and, you know, they would say to us like, oh, you're not pretty or whatever, like, it leaves scars. And find a way to actually say to the critic, okay, I can hear you're saying that I am not pretty enough, but even if you think I'm not pretty enough, I do deserve love and affection. I deserve to be loved and cared for. My physical look doesn't have anything to do with the amount of love that I'm gonna get from the world. And if you do that persistently, the critic is gonna be left speechless. So if you're gonna say like, no, I'm not ugly, no, I'm not fat, you can scream at him, he's gonna scream more. And basically, yeah, it does not make much sense. The inner critic sometimes really does not make much sense. But it wasn't made inside of you to bully you. That wasn't its attention. I will also talk about fragmentation a bit more. Fragmentation happens when we split ourselves inside. It's like schizophrenia, but in a more balanced way. Every healthy human being has it. So we split ourselves in different parts, and mostly because we don't accept certain parts of ourselves. So the inner critic is a part of that. He's also an inner fragment that we don't want to accept. So basically the way to make ourselves whole again is to accept every single part of us, even the parts that we don't like the inner critic, and try to find a way to make that inner critic as a part of our team. Sometimes he's gonna be handy, sometimes he's gonna warn you about dangers, and, you know, like, cutting off fear basically from yourself is not always the wisest thing to do, but you also can't let that fear control your life. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope you have a lovely day, and I will be seeing you soon. Bye!